The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly like what you'd expect from a bunch of species who'd spent the last 10,000 years convinced they were the smartest beings in the universe. Lots of floating holograms, crystalline architecture, and an ambient hum that screamed, "We're very important, and also very expensive." Ambassador Threll, of the Arconian Empire, adjusted his 17 eye stalks to focus on the pathetic display before him. Humanity's application for advanced spacefaring certification. He couldn't help but emit what his species considered a laugh, but what sounded to most ears like a garbage disposal eating silverware. "My esteemed colleagues," Threll announced, his voice dripping with enough condescension to fill a small ocean, "I present to you humanity's latest attempt at faster-than-light propulsion technology." The hologram flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a spaceship designed by someone who'd learned engineering from action movies and fever dreams. The assembled representatives from 47 different species leaned forward in their various sitting, floating, or gelatinous resting positions. Counselor Valora, a crystalline being who communicated through light refraction and perpetual disappointment, pulsed a deep, skeptical purple. "Is that," she asked slowly, "duct tape?" "They call it speed tape," Threll corrected. "Apparently it's different because it's more expensive." The council chamber erupted in what could generously be called laughter, but was more accurately described as various species' expressions of profound, secondhand embarrassment. "Humans have been in space for what, barely 2 centuries?" chimed in Representative Corm, whose species had achieved FTL travel while humans were still figuring out fire. "And they think they can crack faster-than-light physics? The mathematics alone took my people 4,000 years to perfect." Threll gestured at the hologram with 3 of his appendages. "According to their positated documentation, their lead engineer, a Mr. Jake Turner, has promised to demonstrate a working FTL drive within the month." When asked about his theoretical framework, he reportedly said, and I quote, "I'm going to science the heck out of this." More laughter. Valora pulsed an amused chartreuse. "How delightfully primitive. Do they even understand quantum field theory?" "Their application essay included a hand-drawn diagram," Threll continued, clearly enjoying himself now, "with an arrow labeled, 'Make it go zoom zoom,' pointing at what I can only assume is meant to be an engine core." "The hologram switched to show," said Diagram. "It was somehow worse than described." "My favorite part," said Counselor Brent, "a hyper-intelligent fungal colony, is where he's written laws of physics are more like guidelines in the margin." "Well," Threll declared, settling back into his elevated platform with smug satisfaction, "I move that we deny this application and recommend humanity spend another few centuries on basic theoretical education before attempting anything that might accidentally create a black hole in their own solar system." Seconded, chorused approximately 46 voices in various frequencies. "Though," Valora added thoughtfully, "perhaps we should observe this demonstration they've promised. The failure should be educational. For them, obviously." The motion passed unanimously. After all, the Galactic Council did so love being right, and they'd been right for a very, very long time. What they didn't know was that at that exact moment, in a lab that would make any safety inspector weep openly, Jake Turner was proving that sometimes the universe's biggest mistake is telling a human engineer that something is impossible. Jake Turner stood in what he generously called a laboratory, and what the International Space Safety Commission called a war crime against physics. The facility looked less like a cutting-edge research center and more like someone had blown up a hardware store inside an alien scrapyard and decided the cleanup was optional. Sparks showered from an overhead conduit. Jake didn't even flinch. "Jake," said Bert, his AI assistant, in a tone that managed to sound both electronic and deeply exhausted, "I feel obligated to inform you that your current project violates 17 known laws of physics, 42 safety regulations, and what I can only describe as good taste." "Bert, buddy," Jake replied, elbow deep in what appeared to be a fusion reactor, held together with zip ties and optimism. "Laws are just suggestions written by people who gave up too early. That's not how laws work. That's not how any of this works." Jake emerged from the reactor core, his hair standing on end from residual electromagnetic fields, holding a wrench and grinning like someone who'd just been told his idea was stupid. Which was, in fact, his natural state. At 34 years old, Jake Turner had 3 engineering PhDs, 2 honorary memberships in organizations that explicitly existed to prevent people like him from existing, and a reputation that made insurance companies weep. He wore a t-shirt that read, "I void warranties for fun," and safety goggles that he'd admit under oath were purely decorative. "Okay, Bert, run the simulation again." Jake, I've run the simulation 647 times. It fails spectacularly in 647 different ways. Once, the simulated universe just gave up and crashed. Yeah, but did you try running it with more enthusiasm? Bert's silence somehow conveyed the digital equivalent of a migraine. The lab was a monument to Jake's philosophy of engineering, which could be summarized as, if it's stupid, but it works, it's not stupid. Half-disassembled alien technology sat next to Earth-made quantum processors. A whiteboard in the corner had equations that transitioned smoothly from rigorous mathematics into doodles of spaceships with flames coming out the back. At the bottom, someone, definitely Jake, had written, "Note to self. Physics is just the universe's opinion, man. Let me get this straight," Bert continued, "because AIs never know when to quit. Your plan is to create a faster-than-light drive by essentially gaslighting the universe into thinking your ship is already at the destination. See? When you say it like that, you make it sound crazy. That's because it is crazy. Crazy like won't work, or crazy like might accidentally split the timeline. Both. Definitely both." Jake grabbed a tablet and started sketching modifications with the kind of confidence usually reserved for people who don't understand the stakes. Look, every species that's achieved FTL has done it by bending spacetime, right? Warp bubbles, wormholes, all that fancy stuff. They're trying to negotiate with physics. Yes, using advanced mathematics and centuries of research. Exactly. They're asking permission. Jake's grin widened dangerously. "I'm not asking." He gestured at his masterpiece, a engine core that looked like someone had given a toddler a pile of alien artifacts and a soldering iron. Exotic matter generators that absolutely weren't supposed to interface with human technology were somehow interfacing beautifully. Power conduits salvaged from 4 different species ships were woven together like the world's most dangerous Christmas lights. "You're going to kill yourself," Bert said flatly. "Probably not. You're going to kill everyone on this station. Way less likely than you think." "Jake, I'm begging you, Bert. How long have we been partners? 3 years, 4 months, and I've aged 2 decades in stress. And have I ever let you down? 17 times. I keep a list. It has subcategories." Jake laughed and patted the nearest console affectionately, causing it to spark and make a sound like a mechanical whimper. "Trust me, buddy. The Galactic Council thinks humans can't do FTL. I'm about to teach the universe that telling a human engineer something is impossible is basically a personal challenge." Bert's diagnostic lights flickered in what might have been resignation or an impending system crash. "When this goes wrong, I want it on record that I objected strenuously." Noted and ignored. Now help me recalibrate the quantum flux manifolds. Those aren't even real things. They are now. The Galactic Council had made what would later be recognized as their first critical mistake. They'd sent observers. Dr. Kelvix of the Trinarian Collective floated into Jake's lab, his gaseous form shimmering with what his species expressed as academic superiority. He'd brought along 3 graduate students, a holographic recorder, and 17,000 pages of peer-reviewed papers explaining why human FTL attempts were cosmically adorable, but ultimately futile. "Mr. Turner," Kelvix said, his voice resonating through a translation device. "We are here to observe your demonstration and provide constructive feedback on why your approach violates fundamental universal constants." Jake looked up from where he was, literally kicking a panel that wasn't cooperating. The panel buzzed and lit up green. "Cool. Don't touch anything that's sparking, or humming, or really just don't touch anything." One of Kelvix's students nervously consulted a datapad. "Professor, the ambient radiation levels in here are character building," Jake interrupted cheerfully. "Builds immunity." "Probably." Kelvix drifted toward the engine core, his form rippling with scientific curiosity and growing alarm. "Is this—" He paused, processing what he was seeing. "Is this a Vexillarian quantum displacement matrix jury-rigged to a human fusion containment system using what appears to be conductive epoxy?" "Yeah. The Vexillarians were super uptight about compatibility protocols. Turns out if you just ignore the safety interlocks and route power through this weird crystalline thing I found on eBay, it works fine." eBay. Human marketplace. Sold by a guy named Darkstar Collector 87. 5 stars. Would buy sketchy alien artifacts again. "Doctor." Kelvix's form turned a color that the translation device rendered as existential horror. "Mr. Turner, the mathematical framework for faster-than-light travel requires harmonizing quantum field fluctuations across 11 dimensions while maintaining causality. The equations alone took my species 4 centuries to develop. Jake wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving grease stains that Bert would later confirm were mildly radioactive. Yeah, I skimmed a paper about that. Seemed complicated. It is complicated. It's the most complicated. What is your mathematical framework? Jake walked over to a workbench and retrieved a slightly coffee-stained napkin. He handed it to the professor. Kelvix stared at it. His students stared at it. The napkin had a drawing of a spaceship, some squiggly lines, an arrow, and the words, "Make space think ship is over there already," with a first equation, small doodle of a smiley face. This, Kelvix said slowly, his gaseous form beginning to destabilize slightly. This is not mathematics. This is not even physics. This is a napkin. From a pretty good burrito place, too. Where are your quantum field calculations? Your dimensional matrices? Your causality preservation protocols? Jake shrugged. Look, here's the thing. Everyone trying to do FTL is working really hard to convince the universe to let them break the speed of light, right? All those equations are basically really complicated permission slips. That's an insultingly reductive description of 11,000 years of scientific progress. But continue. So instead of asking permission, I'm just going to convince space-time that my ship is already at the destination. It's not moving faster than light. It's more like reality blinks, and the ship is just somewhere else. The graduate students started whispering among themselves in frequencies that suggested panic. Kelvix's form cycled through several colors, none of them translated as anything positive. That's not how quantum mechanics works, Kelvix said, his voice climbing in pitch. You can't just trick the universe. Why not? The universe isn't that smart. It's running on deterministic rules. Rules can be exploited. That's not. Kelvix stopped, his form roiling with academic distress. Show me your exotic matter containment. Jake led them to what looked like a modified industrial refrigerator covered in warning labels that someone definitely Jake had drawn smiley faces on. Inside, exotic matter with negative mass pulsed with energy that made the air taste purple. Your containment field is held together with modified superconducting magnets from a particle accelerator, and what I can only describe as hope, Kelvix observed, his tone suggesting he was speedrunning the stages of grief. And duct tape. Don't forget the duct tape. How are you preventing quantum decoherence? I yell at it. Mostly. Sometimes I play classical music. The exotic matter seems to like Mozart. One of the graduate students fainted, which was impressive considering his species didn't have a conventional nervous system. Kelvix drifted backward, his form now a color the translator gave up on and just labeled as error 404, emotion not found. This violates causality. This violates thermodynamics. This violates the very concept of violation. Yeah, but does it violate causality enough to actually work? That's the real question. Bert chimed in helpfully. Jake, Doctor. Kelvix's vital signs suggest he's having what his species considers a mathematical breakdown. He'll be fine. Physics professors are tougher than they look. Jake turned back to his engine. Anyway, we're testing it tomorrow. You guys are welcome to watch from a safe distance. Define safe distance, one of the students squeaked. Different solar systems should probably be fine. Dr. Kelvix made a sound like a deflating balloon, filled with existential dread. I'm going to write 17 papers about why this won't work. Cool. Can you do it after the test? I'm kind of on a schedule. As the observers fled the lab, their faith in universal constants shaken to the core, Jake turned to Bert with a satisfied grin. That went well. Jake, you broke a physicist. Yeah, but in a productive way. The day of the test flight arrived with all the fanfare of humanity's greatest achievements, which is to say, someone brought donuts and Jake hadn't slept in 36 hours. The Galactic Council had assembled virtually, their holograms floating in a viewing gallery that the Earth Space Agency had set up specifically, so the aliens could watch humanity either succeed spectacularly or fail in a way that would be taught in engineering schools for centuries as a cautionary tale. Ambassador Threll looked positively giddy. All 17 eye stalks focused on the launch pad where Jake's ship sat like a middle finger to theoretical physics. I've taken the liberty of starting a betting pool on failure modes. Current favorite is catastrophic space-time rupture. I've got 50 credits on just explodes normally, added Counselor Corm. Valora pulsed an amused violet. I'm betting on nothing happens and human stands there confused. It seems most likely. Dr. Kelvix, who had spent the last 24 hours writing furious rebuttals to physics that hadn't been violated yet, was muttering calculations, and looked like he'd discovered his life's work was a cosmic joke. The probability of success is so close to zero that it's basically dating zero and looking at engagement rings. Down on the launch pad, Jake climbed into what he'd named the probable cause, which was either confidence or honesty depending on your perspective. The ship looked exactly like something designed by someone who'd been told about spaceships but had never actually seen one. It had angles that didn't make sense, panels that didn't quite line up, and was painted a color that could only be described as aggressive optimism orange. "Bert, systems check," Jake said, strapping into a pilot seat that he'd salvaged from a racing simulator and modified with what appeared to be beanbag filling. "Jake, I feel I should mention one final time that every simulation predicts catastrophic failure. How many simulations predicted I'd get this far? Zero. Literally zero. See? We're already beating expectations. What's the worst that could happen?" In the observation gallery, every alien representative simultaneously shuddered at those words. They'd been in space long enough to know that what's the worst that could happen was less a question and more a verbal summons for chaos. "Initiating power sequence," Jake announced over the open channel. The exotic matter containment hummed to life with a sound like the universe clearing its throat nervously. The alien observers leaned forward. This was it. Thousands of years of established physics were about to defend their honor against one human with more confidence than sense. Quantum displacement matrix online. Causality dampeners at, let's call it 80%. Reality anchors looking solid. Engaging primary drive in 3, 2, 1. Jake pressed a button he'd labeled Go Fast. For a moment, absolutely nothing happened. Threll started to make a sound of vindication. Then reality had what could only be described as a brief moment of profound confusion. The air around the probable cause shimmered. Space itself seemed to squint, trying to figure out what it was looking at. The ship didn't accelerate. It didn't warp. It didn't do any of the things that FTL travel was supposed to do. It just stopped being there and started being 3 star systems away. Instantly. The telemetry came back immediately because the communication arrays hadn't gotten the memo that they should be dealing with light-speed lag. Jake's voice crackled over the channel, casual as someone commenting on the weather. "Huh. Worked better than expected. Little bumpy. Bert, you still there?" "Physically, yes. Mentally, I may need therapy." "Cool. Coming back now." Reality blinked again. The probable cause reappeared exactly where it had started, like it had never left, except the hull temperature readings showed it had absolutely been somewhere else. The observation gallery was silent. Completely, utterly silent. Jake popped the cockpit and climbed out, stretching like he'd just finished a short commute. So, yeah, faster than light travel. Turns out you just have to convince the universe you're already at the destination. Like manifesting, but with more exotic matter. Threll's eye stalks went limp. All 17 of them. Counselor Korm made a sound like a computer trying to process a divide by zero error. Valora's crystalline form cycled through every color in the spectrum, and then invented 3 new ones that would later be named Existential Crisis. Blue. Everything I know is wrong green, and please let this be a simulation purple. Dr. Kelvix simply froze, his gaseous form going completely still. One of his graduate students checked if he was still alive. He was, but his vital signs suggested his consciousness had briefly left his body to go have a conversation with the concept of reality itself. "That's," Kelvix finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's impossible." "Yeah, you keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." The professor's form began cycling through colors so rapidly that his translation device gave up and just displayed a spinning loading icon. "Your ship just violated causality, thermodynamics, special relativity, general relativity, and possibly free will. Do you understand what you've done?" Jake thought about it. "Made physics my personal suggestion box?" One of the council members, a dignified crystalline entity who'd held his position for 3,000 years, stood up slowly. "I need to go lie down." "Your species doesn't require rest," Threll pointed out weakly. "I do now." Ambassador Threll looked at the data streaming in from every sensor that had tracked the probable cause's flight. Or non-flight, or whatever they were supposed to call deliberately breaking the universe's most fundamental rules. "I need to call my supervisor, and possibly my therapist, and maybe a priest, though I'm not sure which god to pray to anymore." Jake, completely oblivious to the psychological damage he'd just inflicted on 47 different species worth of scientists, grabbed a donut from the box someone had left near the launch pad. "So, do we pass the certification or what?" In the observation gallery, Dr. Kelvix began laughing. It was not a healthy laugh. It was the laugh of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just been rewritten by a human with a cocktail napkin and excessive confidence. He did it. Kelvix wheezed between laughs that sounded increasingly unhinged. He actually did it. 11,000 years of scientific progress, and a human just vibed his way past the speed of light. Bert's voice came through Jake's communicator, sounding like an AI having an existential revelation. Jake, I've run the analysis. According to these readings, you didn't break the laws of physics. See? Totally safe. You didn't break them because the universe is apparently too confused to enforce them against you. Reality took one look at what you were doing and just gave up. Jake grinned and took a bite of his donut. I'm gonna call that a win. The news spread through the galactic scientific community with the speed of, ironically, something that had just redefined what speed meant. Within 6 hours, Jake Turner's test flight had triggered what historians would later call the Great Unraveling, or, less formally, that time a human made everyone question everything. Dr. Kelvix had locked himself in his research facility and was systematically burning 11,000 years of peer-reviewed physics papers. Not digitally deleting them, actually burning them. His assistants had confiscated the matches, but he'd moved on to using a plasma torch. 4,000 years, he muttered, watching centuries of established quantum field theory turn to ash. 4,000 years my species spent developing the mathematics for space-time manipulation, and a human just doodled on a napkin and did it better. His colleague Dr. Vin tried to be supportive. Perhaps there's something we missed in the theoretical framework? Missed? We didn't miss anything. The human ignored the framework entirely. He looked at the fundamental laws governing reality and said, nah, and reality just went along with it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The Arxian Institute of Higher Physics had declared a mandatory mental health week. The Crystalline Academy had shut down entirely after 3 professors achieved what their species called enlightenment through despair. A prestigious university, on Kepler 442b, had changed its motto from knowledge through understanding to what's even the point anymore. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Everyone looked shell-shocked. Threll's eye stalks drooped at angles that suggested he'd been awake for 48 hours questioning his life choices. Colleagues, he began tiredly, we need to discuss the human situation. There is no situation, Counselor Corm said flatly. We simply refuse to acknowledge it happened. If we all agree it didn't happen, then it didn't happen. That's not how reality works. Reality doesn't work anyway, apparently. Valora pulsed a defeated gray. I've reviewed the telemetry 1,700 times. The human ship didn't travel. It didn't warp space. It just convinced the universe it was in a different location. That's not physics. That's gaslighting, on a cosmic scale. I motion we ban humans from doing science, suggested a representative whose name translated to concerned blob. On what grounds? On the grounds that they're clearly playing by different rules than the rest of us, and it's not fair. Ambassador Threll pulled up a hologram showing Jake's technical specifications, which the human had helpfully submitted as part of his certification application. The document was 12 pages long. 9 of those pages were memes. One was a crude drawing of a stick figure giving a thumbs up. The actual technical content could be summarized as exotic matter goes brr. His methodology section, Threll said slowly, just says trust the process in bold letters. What process? Someone shouted. Exactly. A message alert interrupted the meeting. It was from the Pan-Galactic Institute of Theoretical Physics. Their entire board of directors had submitted their resignations, effective immediately. The resignation letter was 1 sentence long. We studied for centuries to understand the fine universe, and a human with duct tape just made us all obsolete. Dr. Kelvix materialized in the council chamber, his gaseous form looking disheveled, which was impressive for something without a solid state. I demand to see his calculations. We've asked, Threll replied, multiple times. And he sent us a video of himself shrugging and saying, I just kind of felt it out. Kelvix's form turned a color that the universal translator refused to process and just displayed as several error messages. Felt it out. Felt it out. Do you understand how many decimal places our FTL calculations require? How many variables? How many? He stopped, his form shuddering. He doesn't have calculations, does he? He has a napkin with a drawing. I've seen the napkin. The napkin is an insult to napkins. Valora pulled up another display. It gets worse. I've been analyzing his engine design. Do you know what's holding the exotic matter containment field stable? Advanced mathematical harmonics? Quantum-locked force fields? Classical music, and what he describes as good vibes. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of Counselor Korm quietly weeping. The human, Kelvix said, his voice taking on a strange, manic quality. The human looked at the most complex problem in physics and solved it with the scientific equivalent of, just be yourself. Should we be worried? Asked concerned Blob nervously. I mean, if he can do this, what else can humans do? Threll pulled up Jake's public profile. His listed hobbies included making scientists cry, voiding warranties, and seeing what happens. His education section just said, YouTube University. According to our intelligence, Threll said. Reading from a report, Mr. Turner is considered, and I quote, pretty average for a human engineer. There are apparently millions more like him on Earth. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a threat. We need to make them stop, someone said desperately. Stop what? Succeeding? Yes. Valora pulsed a resigned blue. I don't think we can make them stop. I think humans are just going to keep accidentally revolutionizing physics while eating donuts and making internet jokes, and there's nothing we can do about it. Doctor. Kelvix drifted to the viewing screen showing Earth, that little blue marble of a planet that had just humiliated the galaxy's scientific community. I spent my entire life 300 years studying faster-than-light travel. I wrote 47 papers. I won the Trinarian Prize for Theoretical Excellence. And a human who learned engineering from watching explosion videos just made it all meaningless in an afternoon. If it helps, Threll offered, he did use some of your species' technology. The quantum displacement matrix. He bought it on eBay and hooked it up wrong, and it worked better. The council sat in defeated silence, each representative contemplating how to explain to their respective civilizations that humanity had just speed-run past millennia of scientific progress, using nothing but audacity and a concerning disregard for theoretical impossibility. Finally, Threll spoke. All in favor of granting humanity full advanced spacefaring certification and never speaking of this again? The vote was unanimous. And all in favor of instituting a new galactic policy. Never, under any circumstances, tell a human that something is impossible? Also unanimous. Meeting adjourned. I'm going to go drink something that will help me forget the last 48 hours. As the council dispersed, Dr. Kelvix remained, staring at Earth on the view screen. His assistant approached cautiously. Professor, are you all right? No, Kelvix replied honestly. But I think I'm going to audit one of their engineering courses. If you can't beat them, maybe you can figure out what the hell they're doing. That's very mature of you, Professor. Mature nothing. I want to learn how to make the universe my personal suggestion box. 3 months after Jake Turner's test flight, the Galactic Council issued an official statement that could be summarized as, humanity is now a full-member species, and we're all just going to have to live with that. The fine print, which most species missed because they were still in therapy, included several new clauses specifically about humans. Clause 447b stated that any human who said, "Hold my beer" near scientific equipment was to be considered a potential galaxy-wide threat-level event. Clause 448c mandated that all research stations keep a human emergency contact list, not for humans who needed help, but for everyone else when humans decided to help. Jake Turner became simultaneously the most celebrated and most feared engineer in galactic history. He received 17 honorary degrees from alien universities, 12 restraining orders from physics departments, and one very polite request from a monastery of warrior monks, asking him to please never visit their planet. His response to all the attention was to post a selfie with the probable cause captioned, "Felt cute, might break causality later IDK." The video got 40 million views across 17 species social networks. Dr. Kelvix watched it 16 times and then had to lie down. Humanity's reputation in the galactic community underwent what sociologists called a rapid recalibration. Where once humans had been seen as the adorable new species still figuring out basic space travel, they were now regarded with the kind of nervous respect usually reserved for species that could accidentally end reality while troubleshooting their coffee maker. Ambassador Threll updated Earth's official designation in the galactic database from emerging civilization to chaotic neutral with engineering credentials. Trade delegations started including clauses in their contracts like no humans allowed near the propulsion systems, and if a human says, "I have an idea," evacuate immediately. Insurance premiums for any station hosting human engineers increased by 4,000%. One insurance company just gave up and changed their policy to, "We don't cover acts of humanity." The Galactic Academy of Sciences created a new field of study called human probability mechanics, which tried to mathematically model how humans consistently achieved impossible results. After 6 months of research, the leading paper concluded with the phrase, "They just kind of wing it, and the universe seems cool with that," and won the award for most scientifically accurate description of human innovation. Jake himself was remarkably unbothered by his new status as the engineer who'd made an entire galaxy question reality. He'd moved on to other projects, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd stuck with FTL travel. Bert had developed what he described as digital anxiety, and had started backing himself up to 17 different servers just in case. "Jake," Bert said one morning, watching his creator sketch something on yet another napkin, "what are you working on now?" "Oh, just thinking. That's what concerns me." "Your thinking has a body count measured in violated physical laws." "I was reading about how time is relative, right? And I thought, what if we just made it more flexible?" Bert's diagnostic lights all turned red simultaneously. Jake, no. Jake, that's time travel. You're describing time travel. I'm describing making time more of a suggestion. That's worse. That's so much worse." Jake grinned and added another doodle to his napkin, this one showing a clock with a question mark on it. "I'm calling it Project What Could Go Wrong. Everything. Everything could go wrong." "That's not even a question, that's just a statistical certainty. See, that's why we're such a great team." "You worry. I innovate. I'm going to forward this conversation to the Galactic Council. They'll just tell you it's impossible. Good. Things should be impossible. Impossible is a valuable service the universe provides to keep people like you from accidentally creating time paradoxes." Jake stood up, stretching, and walked over to his workbench, where half-assembled temporal mechanics equipment sat next to a box of pizza and a coffee mug that said, "Trust me, I'm an engineer," with the word trust crossed out and replaced with fear. The Galactic Council, monitoring Earth's activities with the vigilance of parents who'd learned their toddler had discovered how locks worked, received Bert's alert. Threll read it, made a sound like a garbage disposal dying, and immediately convened another emergency session. "He's building a time machine," Threll announced without preamble. The council chamber erupted in panic that ranged from dignified alarm to species-specific screaming. "Can we stop him?" Valora pulsed a frantic magenta. "On what grounds?" "He has full certification now. On the grounds that time travel is impossible." We said FTL was impossible too. How'd that work out for us? Dr. Kelvix, who'd been attending council sessions regularly now as part of what his therapist called exposure therapy, just laughed. It was still not a healthy laugh. "Let him do it. Maybe he'll go back in time and prevent himself from inventing FTL, and this whole nightmare will have never happened." That's not how causality works. Causality doesn't work around humans. Anyway, haven't we established this? On Earth, Jake Turner put down his napkin and looked at Bert's camera with the expression of someone about to make poor decisions in the name of science. "Bert, my friend, my digital companion, my eternally worried co-pilot," Jake said. "Let me ask you something. What's the worst that could happen?" Across the galaxy, every alien who'd learned to fear that phrase felt a simultaneous shiver of dread. Bert's response was immediate. "Jake, I've compiled a list. It's currently 17,000 entries long and growing. Would you like me to read them alphabetically or by probability of apocalypse?" "Neither. Just prep the workshop. We've got physics to disappoint. And somewhere in the cosmic fabric of space-time itself, if the universe could have sighed in resignation, it would have." Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and reality was just going to have to get used to being treated less like an absolute authority and more like a set of guidelines that humans would follow when they felt like it. The Galactic Council updated their official motto to, "At least it's never boring anymore." It was the most honest thing they'd written in 10,000 years.